Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in our series, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Great Expectations. It's very massive, said I. Massive, repeated Wemmick. I think so. And his watch is a gold repeater and worth £100 if it's worth a penny. Mr. Pip, there are about 700 thieves in this town who know all about that watch. There's not a man, a woman, or child among them who wouldn't identify the smallest link in that chain and drop it as if it were red hot, if inveigled into touching it. At first with such discourse, and afterwards with conversation of a more general nature, did Mr. Wemmick and I beguile the time and the road, until he gave me to understand that we arrived in the district of Walworth. It appeared to be a collection of back lanes, ditches, and little gardens, and to present the aspect of a rather dull retirement. Wemmick's house was a little wooden cottage in the midst of plots of garden, and the top of it was cut out and painted like a battery mounted with guns. My own doing, said Wemmick. Looks pretty, don't it? I highly commended it. I think it was the smallest house I ever saw, with the queerest Gothic windows, by far the greater part of them shan, and a Gothic door almost too small to get in at it. There's a real flagstaff, you see, said Wemmick, and on Sundays I run up a real flag. Then look here. After I have crossed this bridge, I hoist it up, and so and cut off the communication. The bridge was a plank, and it crossed a chasm about 400 feet wide and 2 deep, but it was very pleasant to see the pride with which he hoisted it up and made it fast, smiling as he did so, with a relish and not merely mechanically. At 9 o'clock every night, Greenwich time, said Wemmick, the gun fires. There he is, you see. And when you hear him go, I think you'll see he's a stinger. The piece of ordnance referred to was mounted in a separate fortress constructed of lattice work. It was protected from the weather by an ingenious little tarpaulin contrivance in the nature of an umbrella. Then, at the back, said Wemmick, out of sight so as not to impede the idea of fortifications, for it's a principle with me, if you have an idea, carry it out and keep it up. I don't know whether that's your opinion, I said decidedly. At the back, there's a pig, and there are fowls and rabbits. Then I knock together my own little frame, you see, and grow cucumbers, and you'll judge at supper what sort of salad I can raise. So, sir, said Mr. Wemmick, smiling again, but seriously too, as he shook his head, if you can suppose that little place besieged, it would hold out a devil of a time in point of provisions. Then he conducted me to a bower about a dozen yards off, but which was approached by such ingenious twists of path that it took quite a long time to get at it, and in this retreat our glasses were already set forth. Our punch was cooling in an ornamental lake on whose margin the bower was raised. This piece of water, with an island in the middle which might have been the salad for supper, was of a circular form, and he had constructed a fountain in it, which, when you set a little mill going and took a cork out of a pipe, played to that powerful extent that it made the back of your hand quite wet. I am my own engineer, and my own carpenter, and my own plumber, and my own gardener, and my own jack-of-all-trades, said Wemmick, in acknowledging my compliments. Well, it's a good thing, you know. It brushes the Newgate cobwebs away and pleases the aged. You wouldn't mind being at once introduced to the aged, would you? It wouldn't put you out? I expressed the readiness I felt, and we went into the castle. There we found, sitting by a fire, a very old man in a flannel coat, clean, cheerful, comfortable, and well cared for, but intensely deaf. Well-aged parent, said Wemmick, shaking hands with him in a cordial and jocose way. How am you? All right, John, all right, replied the old man. Here's Mr. Pip's aged parent, said Wemmick. Oh, sorry. I did not emphasize correctly in that sentence. Here's Mr. Pip, aged parent, said Wemmick, and I wish you could hear his name. Nod away at him. Mr. Pip, that's what he likes. Nod away at him, if you please. Little winking. This is a fine place of my son, sir, cried the old man, while I nodded as hard as I possibly could. This is a pretty A pretty pleasure ground, sir. This spot and these beautiful works upon it ought to be kept together by the nation after my son's time for the people's enjoyment. You're as proud of it as Punch, ain't you, aged? Said Wemmick, contemplating the old man with his hard face really softened. There's a nod for you, giving him a tremendous one. There's another for you, giving him a still more tremendous one. You like that, don't you? If you're not tired, Mr. Pip, though I know it's tiring to strangers, will you tip him once more? You can't think how it pleases him. I tipped him several more, and he was in great spirits. We left him bestirring himself to feed the fowls, and we sat down to our punch in the arbour, where Wemmick told me, as he smoked a pipe, that it had taken him a good many years to bring the property up to its present pitch of perfection. Is it your own, Mr. Wemmick? Oh, yes, said Wemmick. I have got hold of it, a bit at a time. It's a freehold, by George. Is it indeed? I hope Mr. Jaggers admires it. Never seen it, said Wemmick. Never heard of it. Never seen the aged. Never heard of him. No, the office is one thing, and private life is another. When I go into the office, I leave the castle behind me, and when I come into the castle, I leave the office behind me. If it's not in any way disagreeable to you, you'll oblige me by doing the same. I don't wish it professionally spoken about. Of course, I felt my good faith involved in the observance of his request. The punch being very nice, we sat there drinking it and talking, until it was almost 9 o'clock. Getting near gunfire, said Wemmick then, as he laid down his pipe. It's the aged street. Proceeding into the castle again, we found the aged heating the poker with expectant eyes, as a preliminary to the performance of this great nightly ceremony. Wemmick stood with his watch in his hand, until the moment was come for him to take the red-hot poker from the aged and repair to the battery. He took it and went out, and presently the stinger went off with a bang that shook the crazy little box of a cottage as if it must fall to pieces, and made every glass and teacup in it ring. Upon this, the aged, who I believe would have been blown out of his armchair but for holding on by the elbows, cried out exultingly, "He's fired! I heard him!" And I nodded at the old gentleman until it is no figure of speech to declare that I absolutely could not see him. The interval between that time and supper Wemmick devoted to showing me his collection of curiosities. They were mostly of a felonious character, comprising the pen with which a celebrated forgery had been committed, a distinguished razor or two, some locks of hair, and several manuscript confessions written under condemnation, upon which Mr. Wemmick set particular value as being, to use his own words, every one of them liars, sir. These were agreeably dispersed upon small specimens of china and glass, various neat trifles made by the proprietor of the museum, and some tobacco stoppers carved by the aged. They were all displayed in that chamber of the castle into which I had been first inducted, and which served, not only as the general sitting room, but as the kitchen too, if I might judge from a saucepan on the hob, and a brazen bijou over the fireplace designed for the suspension of a roasting jack. There was a neat little girl in attendance who looked after the aged in the day. When she had laid the supper cloth, the bridge was lowered to give her means of egress, and she withdrew for the night. The supper was excellent, and though the castle was rather subject to dry rot insomuch that it tasted like a bad nut, and though the pig might have been further off, I was heartily pleased with my whole entertainment, nor was there any drawback on my little turret bedroom. Beyond there was being such a very thin ceiling between me and the flagstaff, that when I lay down on my back in bed, it seemed as if I had to balance that pole on my forehead all night. Wemmick was up early in the morning, and I am afraid I heard him cleaning my boots. After that, he fell to gardening, and I saw him from my Gothic window pretending to employ the aged, and nodding at him in a most devoted manner. Our breakfast was as good as the supper, and 8:30 precisely we started for Little Britain. By degrees, Wemmick got drier and harder as he went along, and his mouth tightened into a post office again. At last, when we got to his place of business and pulled out his key from his coat collar, he looked as unconscious of his Walworth property as if the castle and the drawbridge and the arbor and the lake and the fountain and the aged had all been blown into space together by the last discharge of the stinger. That concludes chapter 25, and we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.